Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Coram and Justin Nielsen here with a breakdown of the action in today's session, where we saw energy stocks back in the spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an area of strength. I mean, well and above a lot of the other areas. So the indexes were struggling a little bit, but we'll go ahead and take a look at a few stocks in the area. It's not just about the explorers and producers. We've got drillers, we've got transport, we've got steel. So we've got Noble Energy, Flex LNG, and also Tenaris that we'll look at.
Okay, great. We'll take a look at those. First, checking in on the major indexes. The NASDAQ down 1.2% by the end of the day. The S&P 500 also in the red at sessions close, down 0.4%. The Russell 2000 down about 0.3%. The Dow did manage to stay positive today by just a hair, Justin. But we had a strong couple of days, so this rally attempt is still intact.
Yeah, and it was actually looking a little promising for as much as the indexes started weak. They were really shoring up quite a bit. The NASDAQ got to basically flat, and the S&P 500 actually had like a 0.5% gain at one point. So that was pretty impressive. And as you mentioned, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was positive. So certainly the energy was one of the things that was driving the S&P 500 having a little bit of outperformance and the Dow Jones being up. CVX, Chevron, CVX that you and Ed covered on Friday was looking among the strong stocks today, one of the leaders, and that has a big heavy weight in a lot of the averages, so that helps. But yeah, it's one of those things where we were talking on IBD Live this morning about there does still seem to be a little bit of that bottom fishing mentality, right? The buy on the dips. We were talking about Roblox, C Limited, and GitLab that Scott St. Clair brought up. So a lot of those weren't looking as strong by the end of the day. Even ARK-K, the ARK funds, that was looking a little bit stronger earlier and had like a 5-6% drop. So you have to be very careful with some of these where it seems like a great idea. If you can get the bottom, you can get these pretty powerful moves in short order, but a lot of times there's heavier volatility and it can be tough because if you don't catch the bottom exactly right, you could be on the downside of that, and that's no fun.
And just putting this into perspective with ARK here, so kicking off the week with a loss of almost 6%. So right around that 40 level, that's we haven't seen that since spring of 2020 for ARK.
Yeah, it's certainly been one of those cases where you see how by holding on to these stocks, these high flyers, and sometimes doubling down on them, it's one of those cases where you can just see a lot of destruction in your portfolio if you continue to do that. So that's why we tend to kind of shift over to where the strength is, and this year it still remains oil and gas. Just as kind of like a highlight, I was looking at some of the year-to-date numbers for our 197 industry groups, and just looking at that real quick, I'll share with you that energy coal is #1 at 78.6% rise for the year. Oil and gas drilling right behind it at 73%, international explorers 58%, and oil gas integrated 50%. So you've got energy just dominating the 50% plus for the year, and it's only May.
Yeah. Wow. So quite a move here. And we were talking about that entry for XLE on the first trading day of 2022. And what a time to be getting in on that trade.
Yeah.
But now at new high ground. So a strong session to kick off the week for XLE. Let's also check in on the 10-year Treasury yield because, of course, this theme of rising rates at a rapid pace is still something with us. So just a quick check-in here on the 10-year yield.
Yeah, and they kind of have come back a little bit. That 3% level was a big deal once it crossed that for the yield. So it's back below that, but I think a lot of people are probably looking at this as, maybe a temporary pause before another run. But that was quite a run that the yields had. So a pause is certainly in order.
Exactly. Okay, and now shifting our attention to a couple of stocks. So let's take a look at a driller. speaking of strength in that group, so here's a look at Noble, ticker NE, a streak of a couple of gains here with the stock up 2.5% today. Some nice heavy volume, almost kind of an exclamation point, it seems like, on top of the strong reversal that it had last week.
Yeah, so really, I look at that reversal on Thursday because that's what happened in the market. You had the reversal on Thursday. Noble was able to close positive. You know, the NASDAQ closed basically flat on that day. A lot of the indexes closed well off their lows and well in the upper part of their ranges. So that's kind of your day one of this rally attempt that we're looking at least on the indexes. But for a lot of the oil and gas stocks, these are now back above their 50-day moving average line in comparison to the indexes that they're just languishing below all of their moving average lines, the 200, the 50-day, the 21-day, the 10-day. I mean, it just doesn't matter what moving average you choose. They've been in such a downtrend. But I think that Friday's action was really powerful. The fact that you were able to close above the high from the prior week kind of gave you an aggressive entry right there. But then I think also that downtrend that you created, or if you wanted to play it a little bit safer, you could have been using that high from previous, and it did cross that today, was able to remain above it. So this was something that we did put on leaderboard. We wanted a little bit more exposure, and the area that seemed most relevant to get that exposure in was the oil and gas industry. So we wanted a driller in there. So this was added to the leaderboard this morning. It's something we were talking about IBD Live as well.
And that relative strength underscored by the blue dot there on that weekly chart.
Now we're looking at 3 strong weeks. It doesn't look like it made that much of a move, but I mean, it was a lot of price discovery. I wouldn't be surprised if we took a little bit of a pause as we get to that prior area, that prior high. That would be pretty normal, and that would actually entice me even more to keep this on my radar if we can kind of get that volatility contraction, get tight, and then if we break out of that, that's even better. But it's still, I think, in that buy range right now, having crossed that high from a few weeks ago.
All right, well, we'll have to see how this week unfolds for Noble. And next, let's take a look at FLNG. So in the transport pipeline group, another stock that we reviewed on IBD Live this morning, a gain of over 6% by the end of the day. We had earnings recently, so an early entry with it retaking its 50-day line, clearing a trend line here, or getting close to clearing a trend line here.
Yeah, it's right on the cusp, but you do have the fact that it traded just below the 50-day moving average line briefly, got right back above that. And again, remember, in comparison to the indexes, being above the 50-day moving average line is astounding, for stocks. So this one did have that sharp drop, but it really kind of held okay. So yeah, it's taken a while for it to kind of get its footing, but I don't mind the pause that it kind of stopped going down pretty quickly. And this is still an area where Europe needs that natural gas, and the people that are transporting it, it's not one of those easy things to do. We were talking about this on the show, IBD Live with Matt Caruso on Friday. You've got to keep this, to keep it liquefied, you got to keep it at like negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's not just throwing it into a container. You have to have a lot of specialized equipment, specialized operators, all of that. And so the fact that this is desperately needed in Europe is something that makes the transportation of this natural gas something that's very important.
All right, so potential entry here with FLNG today. And then another way to play the oil and gas theme is with a steelmaker, Tenaris, because they specialize in steel pipes for energy and industrial sectors.
Yeah, and it's really the energy that we're focused on here, right? Because that's where a lot of the strength is. And I want to be clear, a lot of times we really want to see the member, a lot of members of the group performing as well. And that's just not the case with steel right now. If you look at the steel producers, I mean, they've gotten hit really hard. Nucor was one of the darlings, ticker symbol NUE, and that's just been the poster child for how bad it's been for the steel stocks after they had such strong runs. Again, reversed completely those really strong gains that they had. But Tenaris is a little bit different. So a lot of times I don't like the lone wolf unless I can understand why. And Tenaris, I think it's very clear what's happening here. It's their oil and gas exposure. The fact that it's not just about the oil drillers, it's not just about the producers, it's kind of everyone is participating here, the transport, the pipeline. So in this case, making those steel pipelines is something that's really helping Tenaris out. This is something that we had as stock of the day today. Jed Graham wrote a nice story on it. I should disclose that I do have a position in this myself, and I basically did that on IBD Live this morning. As we were talking about it, I kind of laid out exactly where I was going to be buying it. I was really looking for it to get above that May 4th high, and it did. And so it crossed the downtrend, but by the time I got around to it, it was right around that May 4th high. It got above that. It actually formed a little cup with handle on the 5-minute chart, and so I used that as my entry. I'm still being very cautious in this market. I'm just doing pilot positions a little bit smaller. That keeps my overall risk to my portfolio lower. Because let's say I want to risk 0.5% of my portfolio. If the risk is a little bit too large on the trade itself, by reducing the position size, I can keep that 0.5% risk for the portfolio.
Nice thoughts. Thank you there, Justin. Okay, so we just reviewed a couple of good-looking stock charts. Today was day 3 of a rally attempt. Potentially could get a follow-through day tomorrow, but if there are stocks to buy, and if you are managing risk like you're saying, where does that leave us in this rally attempt?
Well, it leaves us watching the market every day, basically, because there's no way to know. I've been wrong so many times if I thought what the market would do and it did something completely opposite. So that's why I just watch the chart and let the chart make the decision for me. So right now, if you just pull up any of the indexes, again, we could be running into some of the resistance levels. You've got the NASDAQ composite up here. So we've got a few levels we got to hit, right? First, we got to get above that 12,000 level, and that would put us above the 10-day line. But then we got to get above that 21-day line, above the 50-day line. And if you start to see the index get up to those lines and then start getting into some trouble, well, it might be that we're going to have another leg down, and I'd be looking at shorts in that case. So it's about being very nimble in this market, or there's also the possibility that you can just sit on your hands for a little while, wait until that follow-through day actually happens, wait for those setups to make sure that they're there. We usually do buy something on the follow-through day, and I think right now it is dominated by the oil and gas energy areas for the setups, but that's where I'm focusing right now. But I'm also going to be very quick to reverse and get out if it looks like it gets into any trouble, especially at those moving average lines.
And at this point in a rally attempt, if we do get an update tomorrow, people are going to start asking, is this a follow-through day? What should I buy? All of these questions. And, Justin, we talk about that in detail on IBD Live. Also, our content on investors.com, the big picture, has you covered each and every day. So a lot of ways that we'll definitely keep our audience up to date if and when that happens.
Well, even the stock market today that we have updated multiple times throughout the day is going to kind of keep you in line with, especially if it looks like it's going to be a follow-through day, we're going to kind of let you know, hey, this is we're on pace for it, and we're going to let you know these are the stocks that are moving the indexes right now. We could see a little bit of that disjointedness continue, that bifurcation, where the indexes aren't looking as great, but some sectors are still performing well, like oil and gas. But again, we just have to wait and see what the market does and react accordingly.
All right, we'll see what tomorrow brings. Thank you, Justin, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Speaking of IBD Live, we'll see you in the morning. Dave as our host, David Ryan, back in the hot seat on our panel. Looking forward to that. Hope you join us, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details. We'll see you there, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.